On Sunday, a conference was held on the southern border of Israel called Preparing to Resettle Gaza. Now, the conference name is a pretty big giveaway of the nature of what was discussed, but of course, we will go into more detail. Hundreds of people gathered on Israel's southern border for a 2-day celebratory conference titled Preparing to Resettle Gaza. Throughout the events, participants heard from far-right politicians and leaders of the settlement movement, all of whom proclaimed their shared vision for the future, re-establishing a Jewish presence in the Gaza Strip. Every sliver of it, as one speaker declared. The conference was put together by Nahala, an extremist settler organization headed by controversial leader Daniela Weiss, who moved through Monday's crowd like a venerated celebrity, stopping to shake hands and pose for photos. Weiss spoke several times throughout the day, including in English to the foreign press. In an impassioned speech, she vowed to make good on her promise to resettle Gaza within a year. Now we have a clip of her, and she doesn't hide her extremist language.
So we plan to take what we acquired in the years of settling Judea and Samaria and to do the same thing here in Gaza. I want to tell you now that in less than a year, each one of you can call me and ask me, did you succeed in fulfilling your dream? And the answer will be yes. Actually, you don't have to call me, because you will witness how Jews go to Gaza and Arabs disappear from Gaza.
Arabs will disappear from Gaza. Now, this language is widespread across the conference. One person who attended also did not mince her words. Reshit has come with her friends. She is the daughter of an Israeli soldier who spent months in Gaza and is now fighting in Lebanon. She is friendly, open, eloquent, and utterly sure of herself. So why would you want to live in Gaza? Because it's our homeland, she replies. It says in the Torah that this is our home, this is our land, and we have every right to live there. What, I ask, about the Palestinians who already live in Gaza? What should happen to them? She doesn't miss a beat. We should kill them, every last one of them. And if the government won't do that, then we should just kick them out. This is our land, and we deserve it. Among one of the speakers was National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is probably one of the most extreme politicians out of the entire government. He said this: "What we have learned this year is that everything is in our hands. We are the owners of this land. Yes, we experienced a terrible catastrophe on October 7th, but what we need to understand 1 year later is that so many Israelis have changed their thinking. They have changed their mindset. They understand that when Israel acts like the rightful owners of this land, this is what brings results. I see it in the terrorist jail cells. We took away their jelly sandwiches. We took away their chocolate. We took their TV sets and their ping pong tables and their exercise time. You should see them whining and crying in their cells, and that is our proof. When we decide we can, we succeed." Now, Netanyahu has come out and said he doesn't believe in resettling Gaza. Of course, none of us believe him, but given the fact that many government ministers were at the conference, then it's clear it's a shared goal of his. Rota, look, I almost don't know what to say at this point. I mean, here at Turn Left, we unpack statements made by politicians, organizations, and provide the real message behind them. We call bullshit on statements such as, "Oh, Israel is just defending themselves. They're just trying to stop terrorism." And we say, no, you're obviously trying to expand settlements and completely take over Palestine. Well, here, they're literally just saying it. They aren't ashamed. So I don't even really know what to ask you apart from, what is your response?
I don't like to describe people as ontologically evil, but like Ben Gavir is one evil motherfucker. Like, oh my god, like that the stuff with the prisoners. What is going on? Um, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we all know the settlers are way out there. They come from this messianic movement, and it is all about prophecy and biblical realism and all these kind of end times prophecies and all this other nonsense. And this is very dangerous. It's been very dangerous a really long time. We know unfortunately, that there is so much money being pumped into this settler movement, not just from, right wing Israelis, but also from people in the US, especially the evangelical community. Um, it's, it's also just, when you see the photos of the conference, you also see how like absurd the entire thing is because it is effectively a real estate conference. We're watching a very bizarre real estate conference that just has a side of ethnic cleansing to it. It's fundamentally just a it just makes you think of this like banality of evil kind of idea. This the fact that these things are so absurd and cruel, but also just so hilariously ridiculous at the same time because it's a mundane thing. It's like, oh, well, we'll build a nice resort here. Think of the communities and the families that could move in. Look at this subdivision. Look at this model family home. But we're also talking about a place that has a current war going on, and they're just fantasizing about, won't it be lovely when everyone's gone? It's It's very like I said, it's this idea of prophecy mixed with the mundaneness of real estate and capitalism and tied into religious fervor, and it's truly creates an alienation, I think, from what you consider what should be normal and what is unfortunately very real and happens unfortunately more commonly we see.
And I think you're right when you describe it as the banality of evil, because in that excerpt from that article, the writer, I believe it was Guardian, the writer said that, well, the woman he approached was very lovely, very nice, very sure of herself, confident, and then she says, "Kill all Palestinians." And I think that's, you know, a lot of these politicians are comically evil, but you have people. I mean, I don't think she was a politician; she was just a daughter of a soldier, and she comes across really, really sweet, and then says the most extreme thing, and that's the point. It is the banality of evil. I mean, you also hit the nail on the head. It's like a real estate conference rather than ethnic cleansing. That's just on the side of it because it's so nonchalant. It's not thought about, and that's what makes the evil more pervasive and it makes it worse and more widespread. Now, this is a so-called fringe event held by extremists, but the problem here is that this is entirely mainstream. Look, we have far right activity in our country. Even though I believe our government is pretty ineffective in tackling them, it's safe to assume that the politics of the fascists, those that took part in the race riots, isn't the mainstream of this country. But when Netanyahu turns around and says, I have nothing to do with this, I mean, that's a complete lie. The attitude of extreme Zionism is very pervasive. It's widely shared in Israeli society. And of course, my producer just told me actually that one third of the government or government ministers was there. So it's a feeling across Israeli society and not just a fringe group, isn't it?
I think this is a complicated question, right? So like on one level you have Likud. So this is like a right-wing party, but it's like a
Mm.
right-wing party because there's already another normal like center lefty or center right party. Um it shows how the electoral like far right, which we will say is Likud in this scenario, works with the far right extremists, the non-electoral far right. These are the settlers, and how these two have a relationship with each other. And that, sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I'm at with the camera too. They have a relationship with each other, right? So there's this electoral end that gives them actual state power and the ability to do things within the strictures of the law, even though those are very flexible when you are the person also governing. But there's still limitations on what, for example, Ben Gavir could do, or any of the other ministers from the far right. It is also very useful to them to have a big and thriving paramilitary organization, just like all far right movements have saw the benefit of having a extra legal paramilitary organization. Because at the end of the day, yeah, maybe actually, what if all the countries in the world get their shit together? What if there's a bunch of international push to have like a complete weapons embargo? The IADF is forced to stand down. You know, all the stuff works out in the best way you and I could imagine, in the most realistic way, right? Doesn't matter because a paramilitary force can go out there and still shoot people. And because the guy who runs the prisons and several other ministers They could just slow roll those prosecutions to the point that they never happen. So like this is the very clever ability, and we see this also with the riots, right? We see the electoral hand of the far right in Nigel Farage and Reform, and then we see the extra legal paramilitaries personified in Tommy Robinson, what's his name, Yaxley Lennon, um,
Stephen Yaxley Lennon.
Stephen
Can't remember
Yaxley
his real
Lennon.
name.
I
Yeah.
have to use his Tory name, not his his silly right wing one. Um, but like this is also the similar kind of thing. The Proud Boys, Donald Trump. These movements are very important, and they depend upon this extreme right to be able to push issues that they can't touch, and also to literally go after their political opponents. Um, this is what is so dangerous about far right politics everywhere, because it's not just playing the game within the rules of how we're all agreeing to play the game. It's playing that game and then also playing a completely different game that no one else is playing, or not that many people are playing. And that is a very, very, very big problem. I mean, Israel has a problem of paramilitaries, and it has a lot of weapons. It has it has a military population of almost the entire adult population. Like these are all very bad recipes to have something poorly go. Um, I also think, like, going back to what we were saying earlier, it made me think a lot of so I have this book that I love. It's called Austria Habsburg to Hitler, and it follows from like the end of the First World War, the Austrian Revolution, through to the end of the Second World War. And right after the First World War happened, there was major starvation because all the supply lines were broken up. All these countries had to collapse. People were starving in the masses. Um, but also in the situation of Austria, it had never been a country before. It was a feudal possession, just a small part of it. And then every other part was governed as effectively a sovereign entity within an empire. So the different states would just not send food to people on the other side of the border, and very quickly, through hunger, people realized what they were willing to do and let people literally in the next town over starve to death. And that happened very quickly in a very extreme situation. But this is one of the main dangers of crisis, and also the main dangers of the far right, because their goal is to normalize violence to the point where they can convince a significant portion of the population to kill another part of the population. And that is how they are able to be successful. It is not, them winning an election or any of the other things. It is getting you to go along with what they're doing or to take part. And both of those things are very, very valuable. That's why also it's important to remember that far right success isn't how well they do in the election. It's how much their ideas are spreading and becoming normalized into society. That is why things like the incredibly right-wing turn on migration, and effectively like the slow elimination of the international asylum system that we're seeing all over. I mean, these are really radical things, like really, really radical things. I think because it's been going on for many years for us now, we don't realize like how unassailable things like the asylum system used to be, right? It was like touted as like a big international achievement. Now it's being dismantled and being used as like a major political tool to like kind of bash each other with. This is not normal. Or not normal as in like this isn't how things were when we thought things were normal. So
And
I've
I
lost my
just
train of thought, to be
I
totally
mean,
honest.
I just want to quickly correct myself. I did say that one third of the government was at the conference. It's one third of the Likud party elected officials from the Knesset, not the government. So I do want to correct myself there. I've also had a message from my producer. The Financial Times reported in the last few hours that a confidential report they obtained found that the IDF may have used white phosphorus on peacekeepers. So that is just one report. I mean, I guess it's not surprising that Israel has once again broken international law, but this is against peacekeepers, not innocent Palestinians. So I mean, they're out of control. I just want to get back to sort of the early part of the question. Look, I want to make it clear that there are many Israelis in Israel who are disgusted about what's happening in Gaza. They're protesting them. They're often getting beaten up by the state police. So there are many people who are against this. But there has been polling that showed that the majority of people either support what the government's doing in terms of it's about right in their response, or it could go further. So whether it's majority, whether it's a minority or a significant portion, I mean, what could you tell me apart from, I guess, being pushed into the IDF at a young age? What could you tell me about the culture within society in Israel that makes this more or less mainstream in a sense that, again, might not be a majority, but it's a healthy opinion people have over that. I mean, look, I remember watching a video a few years ago with journalist Abby Martin. She went over to Israel. She interviewed random people on the street, and they were saying very similar things to those at the conference. So, what do you think that does drive this? I mean, did it start with fear? I mean, we know that the Israeli state has pushed this idea that Jewish people are always facing an existential threats, and Israel's the only safe place for them. And if that's the case, what turns it from fear into rage, and anger? I mean, do you think it's that, or maybe something entirely different?
I think it has a lot to do with that they were if everywhere has had a very right-wing turn because of, like, social media, blah, 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 they were way further along that path before any of that started. So I
Yeah,
think we have to think, like, this is a heavily militarized society. This is one that is having periodic wars with its neighbors and internally. This is a very, very volatile situation. It is a situation where you have a state government that has been governed by, unfortunately, Bibi Netanyahu quite a long time, apart from a couple of breaks. Um, so you got a few things, right? So you have a very conservative society. You have a society that's also built around a narrative of them always being under attack, this constant like reason of existence, this this kind of like Hasbara culture of being inculcated into these like national myths is very, very intense. um so that's all happening. Then you have all of the kind of gasoline that social media causes this to spread out of control. Then you have a lot of foreign money going into Israel over the last, like, I would say, like 20 or so years, where you have a lot of very right wing Christians from the US and around Europe putting in a ton of money to pump up the Israeli far right and also the Messianic Christian movement. If you're not deep into this very strange sect, it's also known as Jews for Jesus. It's a very I could not explain this in a small amount of time. It's out there. It's a different thing. It's like the Mormonism of Judaism. The best way to explain it. So, like this becoming central to the body politic when it was very out inside from before. And even though, so this is the thing, like you can have all these groups all kind of on different levels supporting the occupation or some level of this for different ideological reasons. These can all be broad versions of why they can justify or not justify it. Then you have the situation, you have like a very extremist sect that has also become very powerful very quickly in Israeli politics, specifically because the Israeli right was like, we can use this. We can benefit if we're able to organize the settler movement, if we're able to harness all that money and energy, all this American cash and all blah, blah, blah. Dreams can be made. And unfortunately, Bibi Netanyahu, sitting there in the Likud, who probably, if he wasn't facing jail time and a bunch of other chaos, would have never gone into like the shaky coalition he's in right now. He needed them. He needed them. And then it created a self fulfilling prophecy where you have the extremists from the outside are deeply tied into the far right. They're getting buckets of money poured onto them from foreign sources, not just from the US. You also have a huge Russian diaspora population that a massive amount of money poured in to do specifically anti LGBT communications. So it's like all of these little things start adding up. You have a rise of anti LGBT propaganda and organizations for the first time ever. You have people counter protesting prides that were not happening in Tel Aviv until, we're talking about 10 years ago. And then it becomes an annual event. These are tied into the Israeli far right. This becomes part of the politics. And then everything, which is already very right, moves rapidly further and further and further. Yeah. I mean, and also like you gotta think about all these things. Israel and Gaza also went through COVID like the rest of us. Think of what kind of politics that also cooks up. Like these are all happening there as well. And not only is there like a chaotic domestic situation, they're facing all of the international stuff that we've all gone through. So this is all a dangerous cocktail. Yeah, I mean, and also like you don't have because it's so normalized to have some sort of agreement with occupation or the way the government is set up. Not even if you like Netanyahu or whatever. Like, I mean, how Israel is structured currently in the broadest sense, if you agree with that, there is not a lot of other options to go along. There is not an electoral party that's strong enough. The Israeli left was wiped out a long time before, this was kicking off. Like before Netanyahu's situation collapsed a bit with Likud, he was very dominant in the Knesset, and like these parties have become very dominant. So like, there's just not much there to be able to create this strong counter pull in another direction. Yeah, and the permanent crisis, and that's it. Like Likud has kept everything in a permanent crisis. If it wasn't war, it was the economy. If it wasn't the economy, it was war. And yeah, it's pretty bad.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.